The maitre d' looked Marcus Thompson up and down, then spoke the words that would cost his restaurant $47 million. "I'm sorry, but we don't serve your kind here." Marcus Thompson stood frozen at the host's stand of Les Bernardins, Manhattan. His Tom Ford suit, perfectly tailored, suddenly felt inadequate. The reservation confirmation glowed on his phone screen. Thompson, party of 4. Anniversary dinner, 8:30 p.m. The maitre d', a thin man with cold eyes, crossed his arms. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at McDonald's down the street." These real-life stories happen every day across America. Black stories that most people never hear. But this touching story would unfold differently than the countless life stories shared in whispered conversations. Marcus pulled out his phone. His fingers moved across the screen with surgical precision. "Just one call," he said quietly. "That's all I need." Have you ever been judged by your appearance, only to prove everyone catastrophically wrong? Claude Beaumont, the maitre d', stepped closer to Marcus. His cologne was expensive, his attitude cheaper. At 28, Claude had worked at Le Bernardin for 3 years. He'd never seen a black man in a suit this expensive try to dine here. "Sir, this establishment requires a certain clientele." Claude's voice carried the practiced dismissal of someone who'd done this before. Marcus checked his Patek Philippe watch. 8:47 p.m. 13 minutes until the kitchen closed their special anniversary menu. Sarah would arrive any moment. "I have a reservation," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Thompson, party of 4. Claude glanced at his tablet, then back at Marcus. "I don't see any Thompson reservation. Perhaps you have the wrong restaurant." The lie hung in the air like smoke. At table 12, Isabella Martinez was already live streaming her dinner to her 47,000 Instagram followers. At NYC_foodie_girl had built her brand on exclusive restaurant reviews. When she noticed the commotion at the host's stand, she discreetly angled her phone. "Guys, something's happening at the front," she whispered to her audience. The viewer count climbed. 49,000, 52,000. A 42,000. Marcus remained calm. He'd built Thompson Holdings from nothing. Discrimination wasn't new to him. But tonight was different. Tonight was his 15th wedding anniversary. "Could you check again?" Marcus asked. "The reservation was made through OpenTable 3 weeks ago." Claude's fingers moved across his tablet. He found the reservation immediately. Thompson, party of 4, 8:30 p.m. Anniversary celebration noted in the comments. Special table requested by the window. He deleted it. "I'm sorry," Claude said, "not sorry at all. We have no record of your reservation. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at the Olive Garden in Times Square." The sommelier, Jean-Luc, approached from the wine cellar. He'd heard the conversation and wanted to watch. Behind him, Marcus could see the busboy pretending to clean already spotless glasses, while staring. Marcus pulled out his American Express Centurion card. The black metal caught the restaurant's soft lighting. "I'd like to make a new reservation then. Tonight. Table for 4. Claude barely glanced at the card. "Sir, we require advance reservations. Our wait list is 6 months long." "I understand completely." Marcus slipped the card back into his wallet. "Let me make a quick call." Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, Sarah's Uber pulled up to the curb. Marcus saw her check her reflection in the car window, smoothing her black dress. She'd been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. Claude followed Marcus's gaze. "Is that woman with you?" "My wife." "I see." Claude's tone suggested he saw more than he was saying. Sarah entered the restaurant, her smile bright with anticipation. She spotted Marcus immediately and walked over, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Sorry I'm late, honey. The presentation ran over." She kissed Marcus on the cheek. "Did you get us a good table?" The silence stretched. Sarah looked between Marcus and Claude, confusion replacing her smile. "There seems to be some confusion about our reservation," Marcus said carefully. Claude cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I was just explaining to your friend that we don't have any available tables tonight." Friend. The word hit Sarah like a slap. Isabella's live stream viewer count hit 63,000. The comments were exploding. "OMG, is this discrimination happening live? This restaurant is about to get canceled. Someone record this." Isabella kept filming, her phone steady despite her racing heart. At table 6, corporate attorney David Chen was dining with clients from Tokyo. He recognized the signs immediately. 20 years of civil rights law had taught him to spot discrimination from across a room. He pulled out his own phone and began recording. "Sir," Claude continued, his voice louder now, "this establishment has standards. We cater to a very specific demographic." Sarah's face flushed. "What demographic is that?" Claude didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked at Marcus. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere that serves your usual cuisine." The insult was surgical in its precision. Marcus felt Sarah's hand tighten on his arm. "Our usual cuisine?" Sarah's voice carried 20 years of corporate boardroom authority. "And what exactly do you think that is?" Marcus placed his hand over hers. "Sarah, it's fine." "No, it's not fine." She turned back to Claude. "I want to speak to your manager." Claude smiled. It wasn't pleasant. "Of course. I'll get Henri right away." He disappeared into the restaurant's interior, leaving Marcus and Sarah standing at the host stand like defendants, waiting for a verdict. Isabella's live stream chat was moving too fast to read. The viewer count hit 78,000. Someone had posted the restaurant's phone number. Others were calling for boycotts. Sarah pulled out her iPhone. "I'm recording this," she announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "For our lawyers." Marcus checked his watch again. 8:51 p.m. 9 minutes until the kitchen closed. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Rothschild Capital Management. Marcus glanced at the screen, then let it go to voicemail. Henri Dubois emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. At 52, he'd managed Le Bernardin for 8 years. He'd built his reputation on maintaining the restaurant's exclusivity. Claude whispered something in Henri's ear. Henri nodded, his expression hardening. "Good evening," Henri said, approaching Marcus and Sarah. "I understand. There's been some confusion." "No confusion," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "Discrimination." Henri's smile was practiced, professional, and completely hollow. "Ma'am, I assure you, we don't discriminate. We simply maintain certain standards." "What standards?" Marcus asked quietly. Henri looked him up and down. "Dress code, for one." Marcus was wearing a $4,000 Tom Ford suit, handmade Italian leather shoes, and a $20,000 watch. Sarah wore a designer dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I see," Marcus said. "And what aspect of our attire concerns you?" Henri paused. He couldn't criticize their clothes without looking ridiculous. So he chose a different approach. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We reserve the right to refuse service." Isabella's viewer count hit 84,000. Henri's words hung in the air like a challenge. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade as nearby diners turned to watch. "You're asking us to leave?" Sarah's voice carried across the dining room. "Because of our dress code?" Henri straightened his tie. "Ma'am, we have policies. This is a high-end establishment." Marcus remained calm, but something shifted in his posture. 23 years of building a business empire had taught him when to speak and when to listen. Right now, he was listening to everything. Isabella's live stream exploded with activity. 94,000 viewers and climbing. The comments were a blur of outrage and disbelief. Someone call the news. This is 2024, not 1954. Get their names. Isabella whispered to her phone. This is absolutely insane. I'm watching actual discrimination happen live at one of Manhattan's most expensive restaurants. At table 6, attorney David Chen had seen enough. He stood up, excusing himself from his Japanese clients. "Excuse me," he called out, approaching the host's stand. "I couldn't help but overhear. I'm David Chen, employment attorney. What exactly is the issue here?" Henri's jaw tightened. A lawyer was the last thing he needed. "This is a private matter, sir." "Discrimination in a public accommodation is never private," David said, pulling out his business card. He handed it to Marcus. "I specialize in civil rights cases." Claude reappeared from the back office, holding a clipboard. "Security is on the way," he announced. Sarah's eyes widened. "Security? For what?" "Trespassing," Claude said smugly. Marcus checked his watch. 8:54 p.m. 6 minutes until kitchen closing. His phone buzzed again. This time he glanced at the screen. Jonathan Rothschild, partner. He declined the call. Henri noticed the name on the screen. Something flickered across his face. A moment of uncertainty quickly suppressed. "Sir?" "I'm going to count to 10, Henri said. "Then I'm calling the police." "Please do," Marcus said quietly. "I'd like this on record." The restaurant's front door opened. A security guard entered, his uniform crisp, his hand resting on his radio. Behind him, a woman with a press badge hurried through the door. "Janet Williams, Channel 7 News," she announced, her camera operator close behind. "We received reports of an incident here." Isabella's live stream had done its work. Someone in her chat had contacted the local news station. Henri's face went pale. "This is private property. You can't film here." "We're on the sidewalk," Janet replied, positioning herself just outside the entrance. "And we can report on what we observe from public property." The camera operator focused on Marcus and Sarah through the restaurant's glass windows. Marcus pulled out his phone again. This time he answered on the first ring. "Jonathan?" he said, his voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to hear. "Yes, I'm at Le Bernardin. There's been a situation." Henri leaned closer, trying to listen. "The Manhattan restaurant portfolio we discussed last week," Marcus continued. "I think it's time to move forward." Claude looked confused. Henri's expression shifted from confidence to concern. Marcus hung up and immediately dialed another number. "Maria, it's Marcus. I need building ownership records for 155 West 53rd Street. Yes, tonight." Isabella's viewer count hit 112,000. The chat was moving so fast it was unreadable. Henri stepped closer to Marcus. "Sir, who exactly are you calling?" Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the restaurant. "My team." The security guard approached. "Is there a problem here?" "These people are trespassing," Claude said quickly. "They won't leave." "Actually," David Chen interjected, "they're being discriminated against. I'm witnessing the entire incident." The security guard looked around the room. Every phone in the restaurant was now pointed at the host stand. The Channel 7 camera was rolling from the sidewalk. Isabella's live stream was broadcasting to over 100,000 people. "Maybe everyone should just calm down," the guard said. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Calm down? We made a reservation 3 weeks ago for our anniversary dinner. We were dressed appropriately, behaved respectfully, and asked for nothing more than the table we reserved. And we're being asked to calm down?" Her voice carried to every corner of the restaurant. The other diners had stopped pretending to eat. Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. "Legal Department, Thompson Holdings." "Excuse me," he said to Henri. "I need to take this." He walked a few steps away, the phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, but certain words carried. Acquisition. Tonight. Full authority. Henri watched Marcus with growing unease. The name Thompson Holdings was familiar, but he couldn't place it. Why did he? Claude, oblivious to the shift in dynamics, pressed forward. "Sir, security is here. You need to leave now." Marcus finished his call and returned to the group. "Actually," he said, "I think I'll stay." The security guard looked between Marcus and Henri. "Sir, if you don't have a reservation—" "I do," Marcus said. He pulled out his phone and showed the screen. "Open table confirmation. Thompson party of 4, 8:30 p.m. I have the email receipt." Claude's face went red. That must be a mistake." "Is it?" Marcus asked. "Or did you delete it?" The silence stretched for 10 seconds. In live stream time, it felt like an hour. Henri stepped forward. "Even if there was a reservation, we're fully booked tonight." Marcus looked around the restaurant. 3 tables were empty. "I see," he said. "Well, perhaps you can recommend another restaurant, one that serves people like us." The phrase hung in the air like an accusation. Isabella's chat exploded. He said the quiet part out loud. Screenshot that. "Lawsuit incoming." Janet Williams, still reporting from the sidewalk, spoke into her microphone. "We're witnessing what appears to be a clear case of racial discrimination at one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants." Henri realized his mistake. "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" Sarah asked. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. "Gentlemen," he said, addressing Henri and Claude, "I have an offer for you." Henri frowned. "An offer?" "A business proposition. You might want to hear it." Marcus looked around the restaurant one more time. At the cameras, the phones, the 100,000 people watching live. "But first," he said, "let me make one more call." He dialed a number and waited. When someone answered, he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, this is Marcus Thompson, CEO of Thompson Holdings. I'd like to discuss the acquisition of 155 West 53rd Street, the entire building." Henri's face went white. "Tonight," Marcus continued. "Full cash offer, above market value." Claude looked confused. Henri looked terrified. Isabella whispered to her live stream, "Oh my God, I think he's buying the building." Marcus hung up and looked at Henri. "Now," he said calmly, "shall we discuss that business proposition?" The restaurant fell silent except for the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers. Henri stared at Marcus, his mouth slightly open. "You're buying the building?" Henri's voice cracked on the last word. Marcus straightened his tie. "Actually, I already own it." The words hit the room like a physical force. Isabella's live stream chat erupted into chaos. 128,000 viewers watched as the power dynamic shifted completely. Henri shook his head. "That's impossible. This building belongs to Meridian Properties, LLC. "Yes," Marcus said quietly, "it does." David Chen, the employment attorney, pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. 30 seconds later, he looked up with wide eyes. "Marcus Thompson," he read from his screen, "CEO and founder of Thompson Holdings, net worth $2.3 billion, owns 127 restaurants across 15 states.
The security guard took a step back. Claude looked like he'd been slapped. Thompson Holdings, David continued, also operates through subsidiary companies, including Meridian Properties, LLC, which owns over 40 commercial properties in Manhattan. And so Paul definitely looked a lot actor to me, like he'd... Henri's legs seemed unsteady. He reached for the host stand to support himself. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed. This time, he put it on speaker. Jonathan Rothschild Capital, came the voice through the speaker. Janet, it's Marcus. I'm at the Le Bernardin location. Could you confirm the ownership structure for the record? Of course. Meridian Properties LLC, which is wholly owned by Thompson Holdings, purchased 155 West 53rd Street in March 2019 for $18.7 million. The current lease agreement with Le Bernardin expires in 63 days. The restaurant's ambient noise had completely stopped. Even the kitchen staff had gathered at the service window to listen. Thank you, Jonathan. Could you also pull the current lease terms? Certainly. Monthly rent is $240,000. The lease includes a clause allowing termination for discriminatory practices on the premises. Henri's face went from pale to green. One more thing, Marcus said. What's the current market value of this property? As of last month's appraisal, $32.4 million. Marcus hung up and looked at Henri. So you see, Monsieur Dubois, this isn't just about dinner anymore. Isabella could barely contain her excitement. Gaius, this is insane, she whispered to her live stream. He owns the building. The CEO owns the entire building. Sarah stepped closer to Marcus, her hand finding his arm. She'd known her husband was successful, but watching him reveal his power like this was something entirely different. Claude, still confused, looked between Henri and Marcus. I don't understand. If you own the building, why didn't you just say so? Marcus turned to face him directly, because a man shouldn't need to own a building to be treated with basic human dignity. The statement hung in the air like a bell that had been struck. Janet Williams, still broadcasting from the sidewalk, spoke urgently into her microphone. This is an extraordinary development. The man being denied service appears to be Marcus Thompson, billionaire CEO, and he owns the building where this restaurant operates. Henri found his voice. Monsieur Thompson, if you had known what, Marcus interrupted, that I was wealthy, that I owned the building, would that have changed how you treated me? Henri opened his mouth, but no words came. Because, Marcus continued, the young black man who comes in here tomorrow night, the one who saved for months to take his girlfriend to dinner, the one who doesn't own $1 billion company, he deserves the same respect I do. Isabella's viewer count hit 150,000. The comments were moving too fast to read, but she caught fragments. Gosh, King, make this go viral. Marcus pulled out his phone again and made another call. Maria, it's Marcus again. I need you to pull Le Bernardin's financial statements for the last 3 years. Yes, a hold. And he looked at Henri while waiting. Would you like to know what I know about your restaurant, Mr. Dubois? Henri nodded weakly. Your profit margin last year was 12%. That's $890,000 net profit. Your rent is $2.8 million annually. Your lease expires in exactly 63 days. And you currently have $1.2 million in outstanding debt from your kitchen renovation last spring. Henri's jaw dropped. I make it my business to know my tenants' financial health, Marcus said. It helps me make decisions about lease renewals. The phone came alive. Mr. Thompson, I have those financial statements. Thank you, Maria. Could you read the key numbers for everyone to hear? Certainly. Revenue for last year was $7.4 million. Operating expenses were $6.5 million. Current debt obligations total $1.2 million. Cash reserves are approximately $200,000. Marcus hung up. So you see, Mr. Dubois, you need this location more than this location needs you. The security guard quietly backed toward the door. This was far above his pay grade. David Chen had been typing notes throughout the entire exchange. Mr. Thompson, he said, I have to ask, are you planning to file a discrimination lawsuit? Marcus considered the question. The room waited. That depends, he said finally, on what happens next. Henri stepped forward. Mr. Thompson, please, I can fix this. I can make this right. Henri looked at Claude, then back at Marcus. I'll fire him right now, tonight. Claude's eyes widened. Henri, you can't. Actually, Marcus said, firing him is just the beginning. He walked to the center of the restaurant where everyone could see him clearly. The camera phones followed his movement. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the dining room, I apologize for disrupting your evening. What you've witnessed tonight is unfortunately not unusual. The only unusual part is that I happen to own this building. Murmurs rippled through the restaurant. But this isn't about me, Marcus continued. This is about the thousands of people who face this treatment every day and don't have the resources to fight back. Isabella's live stream chat was entirely heart and fire emojis. Marcus returned to Henri. So here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. Henri waited. Choice one, you implement immediate and comprehensive changes to ensure this never happens again. Mandatory bias training for all staff, diversity requirements for management positions, third-party audits, community partnerships, and a public apology. And choice two, Henri asked. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't warm. Choice two is you find a new location because your lease won't be renewed. The silence stretched for 15 seconds. There's also choice three, Marcus added. Henri looked confused. Choice three? By the restaurant. Tonight, full cash offer, $2.1 million. Henri's mouth fell open. The restaurant is worth $3.2 million. Not after tonight's live stream, Marcus said. Not after 150,000 people watched your staff discriminate against customers. Not after this becomes front page news tomorrow. Isabella whispered to her camera, he's right. This is going to be everywhere. Marcus pulled out his phone one more time. I have my legal team standing by. They can have papers drawn up within the hour. He looked at Henri, then at Claude, then at the room full of witnesses.
What's it going to be, gentlemen? The clock on the wall showed 9:02 p.m. The kitchen had closed 13 minutes ago, but nobody was thinking about food anymore. Henri looked around the restaurant as if seeing it for the first time. 167,000 people were watching on Isabella's live stream. Channel 7 News was broadcasting live from the sidewalk. His entire career was crumbling in real time. Mr. Thompson, Henri said, his voice barely above a whisper. What exactly are you proposing? Marcus adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture that somehow made him appear even more commanding. Let's discuss this properly. Is there somewhere we can speak privately? Henri nodded toward the private dining room upstairs. We have a conference room. Perfect. Marcus turned to Sarah. Would you mind waiting here? This shouldn't take long. Sarah squeezed his hand. Handle your business. As Marcus and Henri headed toward the stairs, David Chen stepped forward. Mr. Thompson, as an attorney, I'd advise you to have legal representation present. Marcus smiled. Thank you, but my legal team is already here. He pointed toward table 14, where a woman in an elegant suit had been quietly observing the entire scene. She stood and approached the group. Amanda Richardson, Thompson Holdings General Counsel, she said, extending her business card to Henri. I was having dinner upstairs when I heard the commotion. Henri's hands shook as he took the card. You were already here? Mr. Thompson and I often dine here, Amanda said. Or rather, we used to. The group moved toward the stairs. Isabella followed with her phone, her viewer count now approaching 180,000. Should I keep streaming? She asked Marcus. Absolutely, he replied. Transparency is important. The private dining room was elegant and soundproofed, with a polished conference table that could seat 12. Marcus took the seat at the head of the table. Henri sat across from him, with Claude nervously positioned beside his boss. Amanda Richardson opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. Shall we begin with the current financial situation? She swiped through documents on her screen. Lee Bernardin's lease agreement signed June 15, 2019. 5-year term with option to renew. Monthly rent of $240,000. Henri nodded. However, Amanda continued, Section 12.3 of the lease includes a morality clause. Specifically, discriminatory practices on the premises constitute grounds for immediate termination. She turned the tablet toward Henri. Would you like to read the exact language? Henri's face had gone completely white. That won't be necessary. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Amanda, could you also pull up the restaurant's insurance coverage? Certainly. More swiping. Commercial general liability through Hartfield Insurance. Policy limit of $5 million. However, discrimination claims are specifically excluded from coverage. Claude looked confused. What does that mean? Amanda's smile was professionally cold. It means any lawsuit resulting from tonight's incident would be paid out of pocket. No insurance protection. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and stood up. Excuse me, I need to take this call. He stepped to the window and answered. Jonathan, what do you have? The conversation was brief, but Henri could hear fragments. Market analysis, comparable sales, depreciation factors. Marcus returned to the table. Gentlemen, I've just received some interesting information about your restaurant's current market value. He sat down and folded his hands. Based on tonight's events and the projected impact on your reputation, the estimated value has dropped significantly. How significantly? Henri asked. Before tonight, a restaurant with your revenue stream and location would be worth approximately $3.2 million. Henri nodded. That matched his own estimates. However, Marcus continued, restaurants that become associated with discrimination lawsuits typically see a 40 to 60% drop in value. Some never recover. Amanda pulled up another document. We've analyzed comparable cases. Denny's in the 1990s, Paula Deen's restaurant empire, most recently, that bakery in Oregon. She showed Henri the screen. Average settlement costs range from $2 to $12 million. Average revenue loss over 5 years ranges from 30 to 70%. Claude was looking increasingly pale. Mr. Thompson, surely we can work something out. Marcus studied Claude for a long moment. What's your full name? Claude Beaumont. How long have you worked in hospitality, Claude? 5 years. And in those 5 years, how many black customers have you served? Claude opened his mouth, then closed it. I'll save you the trouble, Marcus said. According to your reservation system, which I now have access to, you've served exactly 3 black customers in the past 2 years. All of them were celebrities whose names you recognized. He pulled out his phone and showed Claude the screen. This is your Google search history from work computers. How to tell if reservation is fake. Restaurant dress code, discrimination legal. Can restaurants refuse service, minorities? Claude's chair seemed to shrink beneath him. Marcus turned back to Henri. Now, let's discuss solutions. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. Below, a small crowd had gathered. News vans from 3 different stations were setting up equipment. Option 1, Marcus said without turning around. I terminate your lease, effective immediately. You have 30 days to vacate. You lose your security deposit, you default on your outstanding loans, and you file for bankruptcy. Henri swallowed hard. Option 2, Marcus continued, still looking out the window. You implement comprehensive reforms. Mandatory bias training for all staff within 15 days, diversity hiring requirements, monthly third-party audits, community partnership programs. And you pay for it all. He turned back to face the table. Option 3, I buy the restaurant tonight. You walk away with enough money to pay your debts and start over somewhere else. Amanda pulled up a contract on her tablet. We took the liberty of preparing purchase agreements for all scenarios. She turned the screen toward Henri. Option 3 would be a cash purchase of $2.1 million. Closing within 72 hours. Henri stared at the numbers. That's barely enough to cover our debts. It's more than you'll have after the lawsuits, Marcus said simply. Amanda added, we've also prepared termination agreements for staff. Claude would receive 2 weeks severance, and a neutral reference letter. Claude looked up sharply. Neutral reference? Meaning we won't mention tonight's incident, Amanda explained. But we also won't provide a positive recommendation. Marcus sat back down. There's one more option I haven't mentioned. Henri looked hopeful for the first time in 20 minutes. Option 4, criminal charges. The hope died immediately. What you did tonight constitutes violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's a federal crime. I have video evidence from multiple sources, witness testimony from a room full of people, and a live stream viewed by nearly 200,000 people. Allison. 100,000. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Henri a contact. I have the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York on speed dial, James Morrison. We went to law school together. He let that sink in. So, Marcus said, what's it going to be? Henri looked at Claude, then at Amanda's contracts, then at Marcus. If I choose option 2, Henri said slowly, the reforms, what exactly would they entail? Amanda slid a document across the table. Full details are here, but the highlights include mandatory 8-hour bias training for all staff, quarterly refresher courses, diversity metrics reporting, community outreach programs, and a new customer service protocol. Cost? Approximately $50,000 in the first year, $20,000 annually thereafter. Henri did the math in his head. It was expensive but manageable. And if I refuse? Marcus stood up. Then I make a phone call to James Morrison, tonight. He walked to the door, then paused. Gentlemen, you have exactly 10 minutes to decide. I'll be downstairs with my wife, who's been waiting very patiently for her anniversary dinner. He opened the door, then looked back. For what it's worth, I hope you make the right choice. Not for me, but for everyone who comes after me. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Marcus descended the stairs to find Sarah sitting at table 12 with Isabella, who was still live streaming to nearly 200,000 viewers. The two women were deep in conversation about social media strategy and corporate responsibility. How did it go? Sarah asked as Marcus approached. We'll know in about 7 minutes, Marcus replied, checking his watch. Through the restaurant's windows, the crowd outside had grown. 3 news vans were now parked on the street, their satellite dishes extended like mechanical flowers reaching toward the sky. Isabella turned her phone toward Marcus. Mr. Thompson, my viewers want to know what you're hoping will happen next. Marcus considered the question. I'm hoping for the same thing your viewers are hoping for. Real change, not just an apology, but systematic reform that ensures this never happens to anyone else. The comment section exploded with support. David Chen, the employment attorney, approached their table. Mr. Thompson, I've been watching this unfold, and I have to say, your approach is remarkable. Most people would have gone straight to litigation. Litigation is expensive and slow, Marcus replied. Change is what matters. At 9:15 p.m., footsteps echoed on the stairs. Henri descended first, followed by Claude and Amanda Richardson. Henri's face was pale but determined. Louise hesitated. He walked directly to Marcus's table. Mr. Thompson, Henri said loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear. I owe you and your wife a sincere apology. The restaurant fell silent. Isabella's viewer count hit 210,000. What happened tonight was unacceptable, Henri continued. It was discriminatory, unprofessional, and completely contrary to the values this restaurant should represent. He turned to face Claude. Claude Beaumont, you are terminated, effective immediately. Please collect your belongings and leave the premises. Claude's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked around the room as if searching for support that wasn't there. Security will escort you out, Henri added. The security guard, who had been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward. Claude gathered what little dignity he had left and walked toward the exit, his face burning with shame. Henri turned back to Marcus. We have chosen to implement comprehensive reforms. Mandatory bias training for all staff begins Monday. We're partnering with the Urban League of New York for ongoing education and oversight. Amanda Richardson stepped forward with a document. The agreement has been signed. Monthly audits will ensure compliance. Marcus stood and extended his hand to Henri. Thank you for making the right choice. Henri shook his hand, then turned to address the entire restaurant. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to personally apologize for disrupting your evening. Tonight has been a learning experience for all of us. Moving forward, Les Bernardins will be a place where everyone is welcomed with dignity and respect. Scattered applause began from table 6, where David Chen was sitting. It spread through the restaurant until the entire room was clapping. Isabella whispered to her live stream. This is incredible. Actual accountability, actual change. Sarah stood and hugged Marcus. I'm proud of you, she whispered in his ear. Henri approached them again. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, would you honor us by allowing us to serve you dinner tonight? The kitchen staff volunteered to stay late to prepare something special. Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded. We'd be delighted, Marcus said. Henri personally escorted them to the window table that should have been theirs from the beginning. As they sat down, Marcus noticed something he hadn't seen before. At table 8, an elderly black couple was finishing their dessert. They raised their wine glasses in a silent toast. The woman approached their table as Henri walked away. Excuse me, she said softly. I'm Dorothy Williams. My husband and I have been trying to get a reservation here for 2 years. Tonight was our first time dining here. She paused, her eyes bright with emotion. Thank you for what you did. Not just for yourselves, but for all of us. Marcus stood and shook her hand. Mrs. Williams, it was my pleasure, but more importantly, it won't be necessary again. Dorothy smiled and returned to her table. The sommelier, Jean-Luc, approached with a bottle of champagne. Compliments of the house, he said, his accent thicker with nervousness. Dom Perignon, 2008. As he poured their glasses, Marcus noticed his hands shaking slightly. Jean-Luc, Marcus said gently, you witnessed everything tonight. What did you learn? Jean-Luc paused in his pouring. I learned that silence is complicity, sir. I should have spoken up. What will you do differently next time? I will speak, Jean-Luc said firmly. Every time. Marcus nodded approvingly. The chef himself emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 plates. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I've prepared something special. Lobster thermidor with black truffle, and my personal apology. The chef, a man in his 50s with tired eyes, set the plates down carefully. Sir, I've worked in this kitchen for 12 years. I've seen things I should have questioned. Tonight changes that. As they began to eat, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan Rothschild. News coverage is everywhere. Stock price of Thompson Holdings up 3% in After Hammers trading. Your integrity is good for business. Isabella finished her live stream at 9:45 p.m. Her final viewer count was 218,000, with over 50,000 shares and 15,000 comments. Thank you all for witnessing history tonight, she said to her camera. This is how change happens, not through violence or destruction, but through courage, dignity, and holding people accountable. She approached Marcus's table one final time. Mr. Thompson, my followers want to know about the $50,000 fund you mentioned for bias training citywide. Marcus wiped his mouth with his napkin. The Thompson Foundation will establish a hospitality equity fund on Monday. $50,000 is just the starting amount. We're hoping other business leaders will contribute. What's your goal? To make tonight's conversation unnecessary. to create an industry where everyone is welcomed, respected, and served with dignity. Isabella smiled. That's beautiful. Thank you for letting me document this. As she packed up her equipment, Marcus turned to Sarah. Happy anniversary, he said, raising his champagne glass. Sarah clinked her glass against his. 15 years of marriage, and you still surprise me. Good surprise or bad surprise? The best kind, she said. The kind that makes me proud to be your wife. Outside, the news crews were wrapping up their broadcasts. The crowd had largely dispersed. Inside Le Bernardin, staff moved quietly through their closing routines, each of them processing the events of the evening. Henri approached their table one final time. Mr. Thompson, the training program begins Monday at 8 a.m. All staff will attend. Good, Marcus replied. And yes, sir. Thank you for choosing growth over pride. It takes courage to admit mistakes and commit to change. Henri nodded and walked away, his shoulders straighter than they'd been all evening. As Marcus and Sarah finished their anniversary dinner, the restaurant around them transformed. What had begun as a place of exclusion was becoming something different, something better. Change was happening, one conversation at a time. 3 months later, Marcus Thompson stood at the podium of the National Restaurant Association conference in Chicago. Behind him, a slide displayed the words, "Dignity First, Creating Inclusive Hospitality." The audience of 800 restaurant owners and managers listened as he shared the lessons from that night at Le Bernardin. Change doesn't require destruction, Marcus said. It requires courage, accountability, and the belief that everyone deserves respect. In the front row sat Henri Dubois. Since implementing the reforms, Le Bernardin had seen a 15% increase in revenue. The bias training had become a model for restaurants across the city. Isabella Martinez, now a social justice content creator with over 1 million followers, live-streamed the speech. Her original video from that night had been viewed 8.7 million times. The ripple effects continued to spread. The New York Restaurant Association had adopted mandatory bias training requirements. 12 other cities followed suit. The Thompson Foundation's Hospitality Equity Fund had grown to over $2 million, funding training programs nationwide. Most importantly, stories like Marcus's were becoming unnecessary. Dr. Sarah Thompson had started a blog documenting positive restaurant experiences for people of color. Dignity Dining featured establishments that went above and beyond to create welcoming environments.
Claude Beaumont had found work at a chain restaurant in Queens. The viral video made fine dining positions impossible, but he'd enrolled in the same bias training program he'd once triggered. His manager reported genuine change in his attitude and behavior. The employment attorney, David Shen, had partnered with the Thompson Foundation to create a legal clinic for discrimination cases. Pro bono representation was now available for those who couldn't afford justice. Janet Williams from Channel 7 News won a regional Emmy for her coverage of the incident. Her reporting had sparked a national conversation about unconscious bias in the service industry. Marcus finished his speech and opened the floor for questions. A young Black woman in the audience raised her hand. Mr. Thompson, what advice would you give to someone who faces discrimination but doesn't have your resources? Marcus smiled. Document everything, know your rights, and remember that dignity isn't dependent on your bank account. You have value, you deserve respect, and there are people who will stand with you. The audience erupted in applause. After the conference, Marcus and Sarah returned to Le Bernardin for dinner. Henri personally seated them at their favorite table by the window. The restaurant looked the same, but everything had changed. The staff moved with purpose and pride. The atmosphere felt genuinely welcoming. Their server, a young Latina woman named Carmen, approached with confidence. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Welcome back to Le Bernardin. As they dined, Marcus reflected on the journey. What had started as humiliation had become transformation, not just for one restaurant, but for an entire industry. His phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan Rothschild. Thompson Holdings named Corporate Leader of the Year by the NAACP. Stock up another 5%. Doing good is good business. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Any regrets? She asked. Marcus looked around the restaurant, then at his wife of 15 years and 3 months. None, he said. This is exactly where we're supposed to be. These touching stories remind us that real-life stories often have the power to create lasting change. The Black stories that matter most are the ones that transform not just individuals, but entire systems. When we choose education over retaliation, understanding over anger, we create life stories that inspire others to demand better. Tonight, somewhere in America, a young person will walk into a restaurant and be treated with dignity because of what happened at Le Bernardin. That's the real victory. Change is possible, dignity is non-negotiable, and sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination is showing them exactly who you are. Have you ever witnessed discrimination in a restaurant or business? Share your story in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and support each other in demanding dignity for everyone. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. Together, we can make these conversations unnecessary. What would you have done in Marcus' situation? Let me know in the comments, and remember to treat everyone you meet with the respect they deserve.